Welcome to Bilt. I'm Paul. Today I finally get to start the final phase of the fireplace and barbecue structure by applying stucco to the cement boards. I already have some of the prep work done, so let's get this finished. I've done a few stucco projects in the past, when I've replaced doors and windows, building a retaining wall, and patching around the pergola beams. But I've never applied stucco to cement board. And I'm a little nervous about doing this because I'm not sure if it's going to stick. So to help ease my concerns, I'll be applying a concrete bonding agent to the cement boards and then embedding some fiberglass mesh into the stucco. Tools and items needed: stucco base coat mix, smooth coat stucco mix, stucco color pack, fiber stucco mesh, concrete bonding adhesive, wire corner bead, stucco drip screed or edge trim, a London trowel, a steel stucco float, a stucco hawk, a green foam float and a red rubber float, a cement mixer or mixing paddle, a mixing tub, screw gun drill driver, tin snips, a pair of scissors, a tape measure, building paper, a couple of buckets, knee pads, gloves, and your personal safety gear. We are applying a semi-smooth stucco finish to the structure. The smoother you want your stucco, the more challenging it is to work with and also more prone to cracking. This is a 20-30 stucco mix, which is a little more forgiving and easier to use than a true smooth stucco. This is something that I experienced firsthand when I built the retaining wall. Hopefully what I learned in that project, I can apply to this one. There are a few options for covering a barbecue island. Brick and stone veneers are a very popular option and the easiest to install. Other versatile and practical sidings are vinyl, aluminum, or fiber cement cladding. We chose to go with stucco because it would complement our home's design and we didn't want to add another different texture into the backyard. On the Bruce scale, technical ability I rate as an expert. Applying stucco can be an art form and applying a smooth stucco surface is challenging for DIYers. Physical ability I rate as hard. Mixing and applying stucco while working on your knees will wear you out. I already applied the concrete bonding adhesive to the cement boards. There are different types, so make sure you're getting the correct one for your application. Some will replace the water when you mix it with concrete, some will add to the water, and other ones can be brushed on. This one here looks just like the one that I use, but according to the instructions, it cannot be used in a brushed on application. If you are using this as a paint-on adhesive, use a brush, roller, or spray to apply to the surface to the thickness of a coat of paint. The surface needs to be clean of dust, dirt, paint, or any foreign debris. As soon as the adhesive has dried, you can apply Portland cement, plaster, or patches. Clean your tools and brushes immediately with water and use hot water to clean up any drippings. I read in one place you should attach the stucco mesh to the cement board using the bonding agent. I couldn't get this mesh to stick to the cement board at all. This is the non-self-adhesive type, which may be why I'm having trouble with this. However, I really need the mesh to be embedded into the stucco, not attached to the cement board. So I will add this into the stucco when I do the stucco base layer. I did add a drip screed to the walls where the stucco meets the countertop. Originally, I was going to use one of these, but I decided this will have a cleaner look and it also creates a small air gap. This will help prevent moisture from getting trapped in the walls and causing damage to the stucco over time. The stucco will be a 1/2 inch thick, so I'm using a 1/2 inch metal edge casing as the drip screed. To cut a 45-degree corner, I marked where it needed to be cut, then depending if it was an inside or an outside corner, cut the small lip a 1/2 inch away from this mark. Then I cut along the line down to the corner. Bending the casing back and forth would break it off between the two cuts, leaving me with a nice 45-degree corner. To attach the drip screed, I used some construction glue and some self-drilling sheet metal screws, making sure they went into a metal stud. To reinforce the 6 corners on the lower part of the structure, I used a pair of tin snips to cut the wire corner beads to size. Then took the spacers off some furring nails and used screws to attach the corner beads to the corners. I'm going to go around to a few places and apply a second coat of the concrete bonding agent. Then I'll start mixing the stucco and apply the base coat with the fiber mesh to the walls. I'll start in the bottom section first. Once that's done, then I'll move up to the area around the fireplace. I measured and pre-cut each piece of the stucco mesh for the structure and laid them out in a convenient place. I didn't want to have to cut or hunt for a piece while the stucco was drying. A pair of scissors worked well to cut the mesh out for a receptacle. Now that I have all the mesh pieces cut, I can start mixing up and applying the base coat. Normally you should wet down the surface when applying stucco, but the directions for the bonding agent didn't mention doing that. Now, let's see if I can get the stucco to stick to the cement board. Well, half is on the wall, and the other half is on the ground. I should protect the pavers better. My goal is to apply the stucco with a thickness of 3/8 of an inch by doing 2 passes embedding the stucco mesh in between. Using the London trowel is working better to get the stucco up under the countertop. I'll use it on the sides and the bottom as well. Now I will add the mesh. This is actually working well. The stucco mesh is helping me keep a more consistent thickness. Make sure to clean the stucco off the drip screed before it dries. This will make the finished product look better and give you a smooth edge to run the trowel along when applying the color coat. I didn't cut the opening in the mesh. I figured it would be easy enough to cut it out with a utility knife after applying the stucco. Applying stucco by yourself is challenging. It is possible, but it's a lot for one person to do. And since I don't do this all the time, everything takes longer. It was tough being on my knees yesterday. I was getting fatigued and I didn't get the lower section done like I wanted. I realized if I were to mix up another batch of stucco, I'd have a bunch left over and I wasn't prepared to start working around the fireplace. After seeing how much stucco falls as you're applying it, I don't want to get any stucco on the new countertops, so I spent some time taping and cutting up pieces of cardboard to protect everything. I ran some plastic tape under the drip screed to protect the countertops from the stucco. Hopefully I can get the stucco done quickly so the tape adhesive doesn't cause any damage to the surface. I then used building paper and cardboard to seal off the fireplace and protect the rest of the countertops. I have the stucco mesh in place to check that I have all the pieces, and one last walk around to make sure everything is covered. If you don't work with stucco or cement products that often, I highly recommend that you read the directions and you put in the recommended amount of water. With my first batch, I thought I would just wing it, I know what I'm doing, And after struggling to get it to stick to the walls, I read the directions, measured and put in the proper amount of water into the second batch, and it came out not as dry and was easier to work with. Lesson learned again. This mix requires 1.5 to 2 gallons of water. This bottle holds 3 quarts. I also added a mark on the bottle for 2 quarts. I'll put in 5 quarts first, add the bag of base coat, start the mixer, then add 3 more quarts for a total of 8. To speed up the process, I'll use the time-lapse mode on the camera.
Hit that like button and subscribe to Bilt. Hit that like button and subscribe to Bilt.
I need to figure out how to work in time-lapse mode myself. I could get so much more done. The base coat is done and it is dried, and now it's time to apply the semi-smooth colored top coat. One of the challenges with working with colored stucco is that it's 1 bag of stucco to 1 bag of color mix, so it's hard to mix up a small batch. You could divide it in half easily enough, which is what I'm going to do because it's a pretty hot day today and I'm not sure what kind of working time I'll have with the stucco. I'm using Omega Premier Exterior 2030 stucco mix and adding in a color pack. This should give me a nice off-white color. I divided this stucco mix and color pack in half by using some small plastic cups and 5-gallon buckets with a scale. 2030 represents the aggregate size in the mix. The higher the number, the smaller the sand. The smoother the finish, the more difficult to apply. 1620 is your standard home finish. That is fairly rough but easier to hide imperfections. 3030 would be very smooth. They also make a smooth coat or Santa Barbara style finish, which is ultra smooth and the most difficult to work with. I picked 2030 because it's mostly smooth, but a little more forgiving in the application. Since I'm dividing the bag in half, I will need to use half the required 3.25 gallons or 12 liters of water per bag. It's much easier to divide 12 than it is 3.25, so I'll do my measurement in liters. You should blend the color mix and water first before adding it to the stucco mix. And be sure to blend it thoroughly. The directions recommend mixing for 15 minutes. While the stucco is mixing, dampen the base coat before applying the color coat. This will help prevent the stucco from drying too quickly. I'm not going to go into that much detail on how to apply the color coat with this first batch. I did end up with a few issues. I'll explain those in a moment. This does feel like I'm putting frosting on a very large cake. This type of stucco coat should be applied at about an 1/8 inch thickness. To give you an idea of how much one bag of the stucco mix will cover, I was able to get most of the top color coat applied around the fireplace. I ran out of mix trying to finish the lower left side. And to keep with the tradition of working in the dark, I cleaned the stucco out of the bolt holes for the mantle mount. Of course, I had to find them first. I was able to get one bag of the colored stucco mix applied to the fireplace, but didn't quite get the results I was wanting. The color came out really nice, but there are quite a few flaws in how I applied the stucco. The biggest issue I had was it was a hot day and the stucco dried too quickly, and I wasn't able to use the float soon enough to even everything out. So I decided not to do the rest of the fireplace or barbecue area because we were heading towards some very hot weather, and it gave me a chance to rethink my approach. During that time, I rewatched the video I made where I stuccoed the small retaining wall, and I realized I used the wrong colored float. You're supposed to use a red colored float when you're trying to create a semi-smooth texture, not the green one. Here are some of the flaws. It's a bit too rough and uneven around the backside by the barbecue. But compared to the front of the fireplace, this actually looks okay. On the front side, the stucco was too dry and using the green float didn't work at all. You can see this is not very smooth and looks very patchy. I also didn't get enough stucco at the bottom around the drip screen in some spots. You can still see some of the base coat. I need to fill in some spots around the top, and I left a few tool marks in the stucco. Looks like I did these with a stucco hawk. And it's looking ugly around the outlets. I'll have to fix all that by applying a second coat. But before that, I also want to even out the areas around the openings for the storage doors. I don't want any gap between the door and the wall, so I'm going to fix this area before I apply the color coat. Ideally, you want your base coat to be as flat as possible because you can't really use your color coat to even out your walls. If you put it on too thick, it will crack. I took a 1x4 and placed it against the stucco to see how much of a gap I'm dealing with. The sides are not too bad, but the top has about a 1/4 inch gap at this end. Using my hand grinder with a diamond cutting blade, I was able to easily remove this hump in the corner. It creates a lot of dust, so wear a mask. I did put marks on the wall with a Sharpie to know where to apply the stucco. After it dried some, I used a green foam float, dipping it in water to blend it into the existing stucco. That's much better. Now I can get back to the color coat. Stucco is really a three-person job. One mixing, one applying, and one doing the floating. If you're doing it by yourself, I've learned mixing up small batches is how to work around this. When I did the retaining wall, I ended up dividing the bag into 4 batches and mixing it in a bucket. A cement mixer is great and it's easy to use, but I'm not sure how well it would mix less than half of a bag. The other issue is with a cement mixer is it's very difficult to get all the stucco out of the drum, especially around the blades. So unless you can start mixing your next batch in 15 or 20 minutes, you have to clean out all the old stucco first, then mix your next batch. All of this takes time. And about the time that you'd be wanting to float your walls, you'll be needing to clean out your drum. Oh, the wonderful world of DIY. So if you're doing this by yourself, how much stucco should you be mixing at a time? I would say that a batch size should be the amount that you can use in about 15 minutes. Keep in mind that a large area will use up stucco much quicker than a small area. Also, you want the batch to be big enough that you can finish an area end to end, because this will help hide any variation in color tone. I did this back wall and some of the sides with a half a bag, so I'm going to do the next bag in thirds. With a third of a bag, I should be able to cover the back area around the storage cabinets. Then a third of a bag can be used for each side of the barbecue and seating area. To keep the color consistent with each stucco batch I mix, I'm using a food scale to divide the bag of color mix into 3 plastic cups. Then using a bathroom scale to divide the bag of stucco using 2 buckets and the bag. Each batch will require 4 liters of water. I put 2 liters in this white bucket and then added the color mix and started blending. I then used the other 2 liters to rinse out the cup as well as the bucket when I added it to the stucco mix. I'm just trying to be as consistent as I can with the amount of water I'm using for each batch. And instead of using the cement mixer, I'm mixing it in the bucket using a drill and a mixing paddle. This is actually doing a better job at mixing this small batch of stucco than the cement mixer. Other than wearing out my drill battery, it's working great. But I don't think I can mix an entire bag of stucco this way. I would need a stronger drill and a bigger bucket. This time I will complete a section, then go over it with the red foam float to smooth it out. However, I don't want to use too much water with it because that could dilute the color in the stucco. I found this plastic roofing material actually worked well to catch the dropped stucco, much better than paper. It was easy to scoop the stucco off of it, didn't tear from getting wet, and easy to hose off. Other than the loud plastic pops when walking on it, it was great. Just like doing the base coat, using the small trowel works the best to get the stucco up under the countertop. Then use the large stucco trowel to smooth it all out. Well, looks like I waited too long on this side to use the float, and the stucco is too firm to be able to smooth it out. I'll get it as smooth as I can, but I will have to apply a second coat to this area. I need to get some more stucco into these corners, and I still need to get stucco applied in this one last area, which I will do when I put on the second coat on this side to smooth it out. This was too dry when I started to use the red float. I think I'll try going over it almost immediately after applying the stucco. I am much happier with the results of this after going over it a second time. I think the key was, after applying it with the steel trowel, was using the red float almost immediately. It almost seemed a bit too wet when I was using this, but I was able to get it flat and fill in all the little gaps. And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, I went over it with the red float again, smoothed it out even more, and then after about 20 minutes, I went over it again with the red float, and here are the results. I also redid the back of the fireplace, but when I did that, I actually used the red float to apply the stucco. I'm not sure if that was the best thing to do, but it did work. And the only thing that was really different was I had to use a lot of pressure to get it to smooth and flatten out to look like this. Now I need to redo the front of the fireplace. I'm going to probably use the steel trowel and then use the float immediately like I did on this wall. And then once that's done, I do the sides, and then this fireplace is done. Before applying the second coat of stucco, make sure you dampen the first coat. I like to get it wet enough for the water to soak into the stucco, then let the wet sheen dry off before applying the second coat. The stucco is finished, it looks great, and we are super pleased with the results. This fireplace project is almost done. I just have a few finishing touches I need to do. One is attach the barbecue storage doors around the back. I need to get the barbecue put in place and hooked up. And then there's some waterproof covers that go on the outlets around the back, as well as for the switch that turn on the lights, as well as the fire starter button. The last thing will be attach the mantle to the front of the fireplace. But all of that will be in another video, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss when I post that. Also, you might want to check out the other videos I have me working on different projects around the house. Now, where did I put those storage doors?